I will never forget the sound of the gravel popping under Raphael's tires as he pulled away. He didn't look back, just kept driving down that long dirt road, his SUV disappearing into the dust like I was never even in the passenger seat. He left me standing in front of a house I hadn't seen in 50 years, a ranch house in the middle of Montana. Quiet, yes. Peaceful? Not the word I'd use. He had shoved the keys into my palm and said, "It's all taken care of, Ma. You just rest here for a while, okay?" Then he kissed my cheek, quick distracted, and got back in the car. And that was that. No hug, no help with my suitcase, no second look. I watched the taillights vanish into the trees, and for a second, I just stood there, one hand still holding onto the door handle like it might make sense if I waited long enough. It didn't. My back ached from the 12-hour drive. My knees were stiff, swollen from the cold. I still hadn't fully bounced back from the pneumonia that landed me in the hospital 3 weeks earlier. I told them I needed more time at home to recover. I told them I was fine in my own bed. But Raphael insisted. Or rather, Linda did. Linda was always good with words. She wrapped every insult in a compliment. "Your house is lovely, Susan, but don't you think you deserve somewhere easier? We just want you to rest. The city's too much right now. Fresh air will be good for your lungs." Fresh air. That's what this was about. I looked around. The house was smaller than I remembered, though the porch still sagged on the left side. The shutters hung crooked like tired eyelids. A screen door flapped in the wind, creaking with each swing. I hadn't been here since I was 22, before I married Drew. It belonged to my uncle years ago. Last I heard, he passed, and the land sat empty. Apparently, Raphael had arranged for me to stay here a while. That word, arranged, it stuck with me. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk myself, one wheel broken, dragging unevenly over the stones. My shoulders were tight, my fingers stiff. That long drive had settled deep into my bones. And then I heard him. "Need help where you got it?" I turned and saw a man standing near a dented pickup parked under a pine tree, maybe late 50s. Faded jeans, oil-stained hoodie. He didn't move toward me. "Colt," he said, jerking his chin at the house. "I'm the one supposed to check in on you." I nodded, trying to straighten up, ignoring the tug in my lower back. "Appreciate it." He didn't offer to carry the bag, just watched me wrestle it up the steps, then followed me in. The front door stuck. I had to lean into it with my hip. The air inside hit me like a wall, dust would rot, and something sour like old onions. Kitchen's through there. Bedroom's on the left. Heat kicks in if you jiggle the knob on the thermostat. Bathroom toilet slow, so don't flush anything thick. Oh, and no internet. Got a radio, though. He pointed vaguely at a black box on a shelf, then scratched his jaw. I opened my mouth to ask about groceries or phone reception, but he was already walking toward the back door. "Linda said you're on low sodium. There's soup in the pantry, and some crackers. I'll check in next week." And with that, he left. I stood there in the middle of the living room, holding my bag, my coat still on. I hadn't even sat down yet. The silence filled the room so fast it made my ears ring. This wasn't home. It wasn't rest. It wasn't healing. It was exile. I eased myself into the worn recliner by the window. It groaned under my weight. I wasn't a big woman, but even that chair knew I didn't belong. I closed my eyes for a second just to breathe. My lungs burned when I took in too much air. Ever since the pneumonia, deep breaths were a gamble. This wasn't what I asked for. I didn't ask to be tucked away like some overripe fruit in the back of the fridge. I had a life back home. Friends I still met for coffee. A neighbor who checked in every evening. My garden. My books. My routine. I looked around again. A cracked photograph on the mantel. probably left by my uncle, faded curtains, and a heater that sounded like it was choking every time it kicked on. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar. No messages. I scrolled through the last texts with Raphael. Just rest, Ma. You'll be fine out there. Linda says it's the best thing. Me, it's so far. I don't know anyone there. Raphael, that's the point. Just peace and quiet. We'll visit soon. I set the phone down. He wouldn't visit. I knew that now. Outside, the wind picked up. Pine needles scraped across the tin roof like fingernails. The only sign of life was a squirrel darting across the fence line and a barn in the distance leaning like it wanted to fall. I took off my coat and stared at the thermostat. Somewhere quiet. That's what they said. But what they meant was out of sight, out of mind, out of their way. This ain't home. Not by a long shot. But for now, it's all I've got. And I'll be damned if I let them write me off without a fight. Before all this, before the ranch and colt and the silence, I had a quiet little life back in Ohio. My house wasn't big, just a 2-bedroom on the edge of town. 1 bath, no stairs, and a garden out back where I grew tomatoes in the summer. I'd lived there nearly 40 years. Even after Drew passed, I kept it neat. He built those bookshelves in the den himself. I dusted them every Saturday, just like I always had. I used to make pot roast on Sundays. Sometimes I'd bake cornbread, just because the smell reminded me of better times. That house held everything. My memories, my peace. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Raphael would visit back then. Not every week, but often enough. He'd bring me coffee or fix the leaky sink. He always used to say, "You good, Ma?" And I'd say yes, and he'd grin and kiss my forehead. Then he met Linda. She was polite the first time I met her, smiled, complimented my cooking, brought a pie that tasted store-bought, but looked homemade. She called me Miss Susan like I was her Sunday school teacher. I didn't mind her at first, but people show you who they are over time. After the wedding, things started shifting. Not all at once, slow, like something slipping behind your back when you're not looking. Phone calls got shorter. Texts turned into 1-word replies. Holidays that used to be automatic became questions. Are you doing Thanksgiving this year? Or should we just stay here? It was always followed by, Linda's parents want to see the baby. I'd smile and say, of course, even though my kitchen sat empty and quiet while they posted pictures of turkey dinners online. Raphael stopped noticing that I'd stopped decorating. Then came the comments. Always gentle, always smiling. You know, that house must feel awfully big when you're there alone. Don't you get tired of cooking every night? It must be hard keeping up with the yard work. You ever think about getting some help? At first, I didn't take it seriously. People say things. I figured she meant well. But those comments started stacking up like bricks being laid quietly between us. She offered to start scheduling my doctor appointments. Said she could handle the apps better than I could. Just trying to save you the stress. And she did for a while. Then one day, I realized I hadn't spoken to my doctor directly in months. Linda handled it all. Even my prescriptions came through her mail now, not mine. She said it was easier that way. One time I mentioned a cough that wouldn't go away, and she said, I'll call and have something sent. I never saw the doctor, just a box that showed up with pills I couldn't even pronounce. The more control she took, the more I disappeared from my own life. Raphael didn't notice. Or maybe he did and looked the other way. He used to pop by after work, sit on the porch with me, fix little things around the house. Now he'd send a text. Busy week. Maybe next weekend. Next weekend never came. I'd started feeling it deep in my chest. Not just loneliness, but that kind of invisible shrinking. Like I was taking up less and less space in their world. I'd sit at the kitchen table in the morning, staring at the seat where Drew used to drink his coffee, and I'd wonder if anyone would notice if I didn't show up one day. Then last fall, I came down with pneumonia. Thought it was just a cold at first, but after a few days, I couldn't catch my breath. I was sweating at night, coughing up mucus. I called Raphael, but it was Linda who showed up. She looked at me and shook her head like I'd been careless, like I'd done this on purpose. She drove me to the hospital, stood at the front desk, signed all the paperwork. I don't remember much of the first day there, just the oxygen mask and the beeping machines. When I woke up properly, Linda was already in my room, on her phone, flipping through emails. Raphael came by once, brought me a soft blanket, and stayed for maybe 15 minutes. He kissed my forehead and said, "We're going to get you better, Ma." Then he left. Linda handled the discharge. She said, "You can't go back to that cold house. You need clean air, somewhere without stairs, somewhere with fewer germs." I asked where she meant. She smiled. "Raphael's cousin has a place in Montana. Quiet, clean. You'll have space to rest and someone to check on you." I said I wasn't ready. I said I could stay at home and have a nurse stop in. She just kept smiling. That's when I knew. They weren't asking me. They'd already made the choice. The next week, Raphael packed up my suitcase and loaded the car. He kept saying, "Just for a few months, Ma. We want you to get better." But something in his eyes told me even he didn't believe that. On the drive out, we didn't talk much. I looked out the window, counting the towns as they disappeared behind us. It was all fields and fences after a while. No people, no lights, just the sound of the tires rolling over the highway. And when we pulled into that gravel driveway in Montana, something inside me sank. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the distance. It was knowing they had decided my life was too much for them. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't have to. They just left me out here to rest. But I wasn't done yet. The day I got out of the hospital, the sky looked gray and washed out, like it couldn't decide whether to rain or not. I sat in a wheelchair just outside the sliding glass doors, waiting for Raphael to bring the car around. Linda was standing beside me, tapping away on her phone. She hadn't said much, just told me we were heading straight to the new place. That's how she said it, the new place, like I'd agreed to anything. "I still think I should go home," I said, my voice dry from the oxygen. "My bed's made. My neighbor June has the spare key. She'll help." Linda looked up from her phone and gave that tight, little smile of hers. "Susan, it's just a few weeks. You need real rest. You're not bouncing back like you used to." That stung. But I didn't argue. I didn't have the breath. The car pulled up. Raphael barely made eye contact as he got out and opened the passenger door. He helped me in, not roughly, but not gently either, like he was helping a stranger. I caught a glance at myself in the side mirror. My hair looked thin, my skin pale. I didn't recognize my own reflection. We drove in silence for a while. Linda sat in the back, making calls. Raphael focused on the road, like it might solve something. "Where is this place?" I finally asked. "Montana," Raphael said. Eyes straight ahead. "Montana." My voice cracked. "That's not just a drive across town. It's better out there," he mumbled. "Fewer germs, cleaner air." I turned to look at him. Whose idea was this? He shifted in his seat. "It's only temporary, Ma." But we both knew that wasn't true. The plan was already in motion before I left the hospital. My things had been packed, my mail forwarded, my fridge back home emptied. I wasn't going home because there was no home to go back to. A week earlier, Linda had come by the hospital with papers for me to sign. Said they were just for medical management, something about power of attorney in case I got too tired to handle insurance or billing. I signed because I didn't want to argue. I was sick. I trusted my son. I didn't read the fine print. Turns out, I signed away more than I knew. Later, much later, I found out that Linda used that power to sell my house. The home Drew and I built together. She listed it, closed it, and wired the money somewhere I didn't have access to. When I asked about it, months after I arrived in Montana, Linda said it was necessary. Upkeep was too much. You weren't managing it. The money's being handled properly. Don't worry. But I wasn't worrying. I was grieving. They stripped my life down while I was too weak to stop them. On the drive west, Raphael tried to make it sound nice. The place is quiet. It used to belong to your uncle. It's still in the family. I remembered that place vaguely. I was a girl the last time I saw it. Wide land, rusted fences, a kitchen that smelled like beef stew and tobacco. You really think it's a good idea to stick me out in the middle of nowhere? I asked. Raphael sighed. You're not being stuck anywhere. It's peaceful, Ma. And Colt's around. He'll check on you. Linda talked to him already. You mean the handyman? He knows the place. That was all he said. That first night on the road, we stopped at a motel in Indiana. The bed was stiff. The air smelled like bleach. I stared at the ceiling for hours, trying to wrap my head around it all. Nobody had asked what I wanted. Nobody had offered options. They had planned it, chosen it, delivered me like a package. The second day, Raphael hardly spoke. We ate at a diner somewhere in South Dakota. I picked at a plate of scrambled eggs while he scrolled on his phone. Linda called twice, checking our progress. By the time we reached the ranch, my legs were sore and swollen, and my head felt full of wool. I wanted to sleep in my own bed. I wanted to see the red tulips by the fence in my backyard. I wanted my porch swing. Instead, I got a dusty room with a crooked window and peeling wallpaper. Raphael dropped my bag near the door and stood there awkwardly. We stocked the pantry. He said, Colt will be around. You'll be okay. I looked at him hard. You sold my house. He didn't deny it, just stared at the floor. You didn't even tell me. He rubbed the back of his neck. You were sick. It made sense. To who? Linda's been managing things. We thought this was better. Better for who? He didn't answer. When he left, he barely said goodbye. He hugged me half-hearted. His arms felt cold. I wanted to ask him if he felt anything at all. If the boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms was still somewhere in there. But I didn't ask. I didn't have the strength. That night, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. No streetlights. No cars. Just wind and silence. This wasn't rest. It was a quiet dismissal. They didn't want me in their lives anymore, but they didn't want to say it out loud. So they drove me here instead. I was supposed to sit on this land and fade out, like an old photograph in the sun. But I knew something even then. I wasn't ready to fade. Not now. Not ever. If this was your mother, if this was you, would you call it love? Or would you call it what it is? Betrayal. If this part of my story made your chest tighten, please, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to follow the rest. The morning after Raphael left, I woke to a cold draft and the sound of something rattling outside. I sat up slowly, every joint stiff. My knees popped when I swung my legs over the edge of the mattress. The bed creaked under me, just like everything else in that place. The room was dim, even with the curtains pulled back. The window pane had a crack across it, and the wind kept pushing through the frame. I wrapped my sweater tighter around me and shuffled to the kitchen. It was worse in daylight. The floorboards groaned with every step. One of the cabinet doors hung loose on one hinge. The fridge made a soft buzzing sound like it was trying not to give out completely. There was a single overhead bulb in the kitchen, and it flickered every few seconds. Not enough to read by, just enough to be annoying. I opened the pantry. A few cans of soup, some dry cereal, crackers, and powdered milk. No bread, no eggs, no coffee, not even tea. Colt showed up around noon. Same oil-stained hoodie from the day before, chewing on a toothpick. "You settling in?" he asked like he was commenting on the weather. I nodded. "There's no TV," I said. He shrugged. "Signal's bad out here. You might get a radio station or two if the wind's right. No phone. Landline don't work. Cells hit or miss." He reached into the cabinet under the sink and pulled out a metal box. He opened it with a key hanging on a string around his neck. "This here's your meds. Linda said to keep 'em locked so there's no mix-ups." He handed me a small cup with the pills already sorted. "Don't worry," he said. She wrote out the schedule. I stared at the box. "You've got the only key?" "Linda's got one too." I didn't say anything, just nodded. When he left, the door slammed harder than it needed to, and the sound echoed through the empty house. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the cup in one hand and bracing myself against the counter with the other. It hit me right then. Nobody trusted me to take care of myself anymore. They didn't even think I could remember my own pills. I took them one at a time, washing them down with warm water from the tap. Then I went into the front room, sat in that old recliner again, and stared out the window. The land was wide and dry. Weeds had overtaken most of the yard. The fence was leaning on one side, and there were rust spots on the gate. The porch sagged worse than I'd noticed the day before. The boards were soft in places. One corner near the steps had broken completely, leaving a small gap. I saw a bird hop across the railing, peck at something, then fly off. I didn't realize how quiet it was until a gust of wind rattled the screen door again. No cars, no voices, no radio, just the creaks and groans of a house forgotten. I walked back into the bedroom and sat at the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped in the middle like someone had been sleeping in it too long. There were cobwebs in the corners and dust on the windowsill. I opened the closet. Empty hangers. One old winter coat, maybe left by my uncle. It smelled like mothballs and dust. There was a small drawer in the nightstand. I pulled it open and found a spiral notebook. The cover was faded, the pages yellowing. It was blank. I don't know why, but I sat down at the desk near the window, grabbed the pen beside the lamp, and started writing. At first it was just a list, things I needed. Soap, milk, fresh bread, a new light bulb. Then I found myself writing more. I don't know why I'm here. They said it's for my health, but this place feels like a storage shed for the living. I'm not sure who I am without my routines, without my people. I feel like I've been boxed up and labeled too much trouble. I closed the notebook and looked around. There was no calendar, no clock, no idea what day it was without my phone working. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting on the porch, wrapped in a throw blanket, watching the wind move through the weeds. The barn in the distance looked like it hadn't seen use in decades. One of its doors leaned off the hinge. I noticed things, little things, like how the air smelled different depending on where I stood, or how the boards creaked louder after sundown. At night, the cold settled in hard. I found an old space heater in the closet and plugged it in near the bed. It groaned but worked. Barely. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds that never came. Not a voice, not a car, not a neighbor. I thought about my garden back home, my tulips, the blue curtains in the kitchen that I sewed myself. They called this a fresh start, but all I felt was discarded. I reached for the notebook again. What kind of person sends their mother to a place like this and calls it love? I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't for my healing. It was for their convenience. And sooner or later, I'd find out just how deep that went. It was sometime around the second week, when the storm rolled in. You could feel it building all day. The wind turned sharp, snapping through the trees like it was angry. The sky dropped low and heavy, and the color of the clouds turned the kind of gray that makes you brace before the first crack of thunder. That evening, I was sitting by the window with a blanket wrapped around me, drinking the last of the instant coffee Colt brought by. The radio gave up around 5 o'clock. Static, then silence. When the power went out just after dark, the house went so quiet it felt like it had stopped breathing. I lit a candle I'd found in the hall closet. It smelled faintly like old apples. I sat in the kitchen waiting, hoping the lights would flicker back on. They didn't. By the second night, I couldn't take it anymore. The fridge had gone warm. My arthritis was flaring from the cold. I needed heat. I needed to feel like I was in control of something. I remembered Colt mumbling something about a breaker box in the storage room out back. I grabbed my coat, shoved my feet into my boots, and stepped outside. The air was wet and sharp. Lightning flashed in the distance. The storage room sat off the side of the barn. The door groaned as I pulled it open. I hadn't been in there before. It smelled like rust and dirt. Tools hung from nails on the wall, and boxes were stacked unevenly in the corner. I found the breaker box behind a shelf, but just as I reached for it, my foot caught on something, and I nearly went down. I braced myself against the shelf, and a cardboard box tumbled off the top and burst open at my feet. Paper spilled everywhere. At first, I thought it was just junk. Old bills, maybe. But then I saw my name. I bent down slowly, picking up the pages one by one. It was hard to read in the candlelight, but I could make out letterheads, bank names, account numbers, statements that didn't belong to me until I saw the familiar address. My address, the Ohio house. I kept reading. There was a folder inside with printouts, emails. They weren't even hidden well, just sitting there in a folder labeled legal backup. I read each line carefully. The first one was from Linda to some lawyer. Subject line, simplifying Susan's assets. Another one from Raphael. She'll be more comfortable out there. Less complicated this way. And then the line that stopped me cold. She won't be around much longer anyway. That's what they said about me. Like I was on my way out. Like I was a dog that wandered too far from the yard and might not make it through the winter. I sank to the floor, holding the folder tight to my chest, the pages still in my hands. My legs folded beneath me, like they couldn't hold the weight of what I'd just read. I wasn't just sent away. I was written off. They didn't put me here to heal. They put me here to wait it out, quietly, out of sight. And all of it had been planned. Linda didn't just take over my doctor visits out of kindness. She took over my records, my bank accounts, my house. They sold it while I was in a hospital bed breathing through a tube. Raphael didn't fight it. He signed the papers. He stood beside her and let it happen. My son. I couldn't cry. Not yet. My body wouldn't even let me. I sat there for I don't know how long. Long enough for the storm to pass and the wind to calm. When I finally stood up, I wasn't the same. I felt something inside me tighten. Not just anger. Something harder. Something that didn't want to be pitted anymore. I walked back to the house with the folder pressed against my coat. My hands shook, not from weakness this time, but from rage. In the kitchen, I cleared the table and spread the papers out. One by one, I made a stack. Bank records, sale agreements, email printouts, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to call them. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. I wasn't going to ask why. I already knew. They didn't think I had a fight left in me. They didn't think I'd ever know what they'd done. And if I did know, they figured I wouldn't do anything about it. That's what made me the most angry, not just the betrayal, but the fact that they counted me out before I ever had the chance to stand back up. I gathered the papers, put them back into the folder, and slid it under the mattress in the spare bedroom. Just for now. I looked around the kitchen. The flickering light had gone out for good. I lit another candle and pulled the notebook from the drawer. And I wrote, "They see me as finished. They've made their moves. But they forgot something. I've survived worse than this. And I'm still breathing." The next morning, I stepped outside into the cold, looked at the land in front of me, and whispered out loud, "You put me here to disappear." But I wasn't disappearing. I was waking up. They didn't think I'd find out. But I did. And if you've ever been treated like you didn't matter, like your life could be managed and erased behind your back, then you understand. So don't scroll past this. Hit that like button. Share this story. Subscribe, because I'm not done yet. And if you're sitting there watching and choosing not to subscribe, tell me why in the comments. I want to hear it. The day after the storm, I got up earlier than usual. The power was still out, but something had shifted inside me. I didn't feel better, not in the way a doctor might measure, but I didn't feel helpless anymore either. I made myself a piece of dry toast and ate it standing at the counter. No butter, no jelly, just toast and a decision. If they wanted me to fade, quietly they'd picked the wrong woman. After breakfast, I stepped outside with my coat zipped up tight. The wind had calmed, but the cold still bit through the sleeves. I walked to the edge of the porch and looked out at the field. The grass had grown tall and tangled. Weeds poked through the cracks in the driveway. The barn door hung halfway open like a crooked smile. I took one careful step down, then another. My knees complained, but I kept moving. I hadn't walked more than from room to room in weeks. My legs wobbled and my hip ached, but I didn't stop. That first walk only lasted 5 minutes. I made it to the mailbox and back, holding the railing on the porch as I climbed up. The next morning, I did it again. A little farther, a little stronger. By the end of the week, I could walk to the barn without stopping. The pain was still there, but it wasn't in charge anymore. One morning, after my walk, I decided to poke around inside the barn. The smell of old hay and grease hit me as soon as I stepped through the door. Dust floated in the air like little flecks of memory. There were shelves lining one wall, rusted bolts, empty coffee cans full of nails, wooden crates with faded writing. And then, in the corner, under a dusty tarp, I found something that looked like a radio. A big one, metal knobs, thick wires, and a cracked plastic dial. I brushed it off and saw the words General Electric stamped on the side. I remembered my father tinkering with something like this when I was a girl. He'd sit in the back room with his headphones on, talking to people in places I'd never heard of. I found a milk crate full of manuals under the table. Pages yellowed, but still legible. That afternoon, I sat on a stool in that barn with a flashlight between my knees, flipping pages. I didn't understand half of it at first, but I kept reading. I circled terms I didn't know, made notes in the margins. I wasn't trying to reach anyone. I just needed something to learn, something that was mine again. The next day, I opened every drawer in the barn. Most were empty, but the back cabinet held a surprise. My father's old tools. Real ones. Wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers with wooden handles. Still wrapped in a canvas roll, tied with string. I pressed my hand over them and closed my eyes for a second. I remembered his voice, how he used to hum while he worked, how he taught me to change a flat tire and patch a leaky pipe before I was 16. I rolled up my sleeves. That afternoon, I tightened the screws on the loose porch steps. I swept out the barn. I patched the chicken wire on the side window. Small things, simple things, but they mattered. That evening, I wrote in my notebook, "My body is slow, but my hands still remember. My father taught me to fix things. My mother taught me to endure. They didn't raise me to be anyone's afterthought." The next morning, I cleaned out the kitchen drawers, tossed expired boxes, reorganized the shelves, wiped down the walls. I found an old radio and coaxed it to life. It only played one station, but it was enough. Classical music, mostly. Nothing fancy, but it filled the air again. The day after that, I cleaned the windows. Then I oiled the squeaky hinges on the front door. I made a list of things I could try fixing next: the roof gutter, the loose fence post, the rusted hinges on the tool shed. Colt showed up later that week, same as always, dragging his boots across the porch. "Didn't expect to see you out here working," he said, eyeing the broom in my hand. I shrugged. "Didn't expect to still be waiting on heat and groceries, but here we are." He smirked. "Linda said you needed rest." I didn't answer, just held the door open and let him drop off the supplies. He left quickly, like always. Said he had another job to get to. I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for conversation. I had enough of my own thoughts to keep me busy. Each day, I picked one thing to fix. Not everything, just one. Some days, it was sorting the shed. Others, it was walking the fence line to see what needed mending. The work didn't just help the house, it helped me. I felt stronger. Not young, not cured, but capable again. And that meant more than I could say. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't broken. I was a woman with 2 hands, a sharp mind, and a long memory. And I had work to do. It was a Tuesday morning when I first saw him. I'd gone outside early to check on the porch gutter, which had come loose again in the night. I was up on the step ladder, holding a wrench with one hand and gripping the railing with the other, when I heard a voice from across the fence. "You always work this hard before breakfast." I turned my head fast and nearly lost my balance. He raised a hand like he was calming a horse. "Easy there," he said. "Didn't mean to spook you." He was standing just on the other side of the fence. Tall, maybe mid-70s, stocky but not heavy. Work boots, flannel shirt, a ball cap with a faded logo I couldn't make out. I steadied myself and climbed down slowly. Can't say I expected company. "I figured that." He said, "I live over the ridge. Name's Jonah Cray." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Susan Sutherland." He nodded. "Saw your lights flicker during that storm last week. Thought about coming over sooner, but figured you might be resting, or didn't want a stranger knocking." I studied him for a moment. He didn't seem in a hurry, didn't look nosy either, just a man curious about who was living next door. "You knew my father," I said, not quite as a question. Jonah's eyes crinkled at the edges. "Joe Sutherland, big hands, liked sour candy. He helped my dad build our well when I was 12. I smiled. He always carried lemon drops in his coat. Jonah pointed toward the barn. "He taught me how to fix a water pump in that same building. Said, nothing you can't learn with a wrench and a little cussing." That sounds like him. We stood there quietly for a second, not awkward, just settled, like the land itself was giving us permission to speak slow. Jonah nodded toward the porch. "That heater of yours working?" "Barely," I said. "Kicks in when it wants to. Makes a sound like it's coughing up metal." He tilted his head. "Mind if I take a look?" I hesitated. "I won't touch anything without asking," he added. I nodded and led him inside. He crouched near the wall unit, listening, then pulled out a small flashlight from his coat. He asked for a screwdriver. I handed him one from my father's tool roll. "You've kept these nice," he said, adjusting the settings. "They were my dad's. I figured it was time to stop letting them rust." He smiled. Good way to honor a man. He had the thing opened and cleaned within 20 minutes. Showed me how to reset it if it stalled again. Said the coils just needed cleaning and the wiring was loose. After that, he stood and dusted off his knees. "You've done a good job out here." "I'm still learning," I said. "Seems like you've remembered plenty." Before he left, he glanced at the barn. "Saw you had a ham set up in there. You ever get it running?" "Not yet," I said. "I've been reading the manuals, but some of the wiring's beyond me." He tapped the brim of his hat. "I can help with that. Used to work transmission lines before I retired." That Friday, he came back with a thermos of coffee and a biscuit wrapped in foil. He handed it to me like it was no big deal. "Just figured you might need a second pair of eyes," he said. "I made us both a fresh pot of coffee. Anyway, we spent the morning in the barn. He explained what each switch and wire did, showing me how to test the signal, how to use call signs, how to connect to the emergency frequencies. I took notes, asked questions, didn't feel foolish. He never made me feel slow or in the way, just showed me like it was the most natural thing in the world. The next week, he brought over a small generator, said it was an extra from his shed, showed me how to start it and connect it to the outlets, said it wouldn't run everything, but it'd keep the lights on and the fridge cold during the next storm. I wanted to argue, to insist I couldn't take it, but he raised a hand. "I'm not doing you a favor," he said. "I'm just being a neighbor. That's what we do out here." I nodded, quietly thankful. He came by more after that, never uninvited, always with a reason. One day, he helped me fix the back steps. Another, he brought over seeds and showed me how to check if the soil out back was good for a small garden. We didn't talk about personal things. Not yet, but he'd ask how I was sleeping. I'd ask about his chickens. He told me about his wife, Lorna, who passed 3 years earlier. "She was the glue," he said, "held everything together, even when I didn't know it needed holding." I understood that. We sat on the porch that evening, sipping weak coffee out of chipped mugs. He didn't ask why I was here, didn't press, just sat quiet while the sun dropped behind the trees. I glanced over at him. He wasn't trying to fix me. He wasn't feeling sorry for me. He was just there, present, and somehow that mattered more than anything else. It didn't take a hero. It didn't take flowers or a big gesture. It just took one neighbor who looked me in the eye and saw a person, not a burden. If someone like that ever showed up for you, or if you wish they had, like this video, share it and subscribe. And if you don't want to subscribe, then be honest. Head to the comments and tell me why not. I'll read every word. It was a Saturday morning, 6 months to the day since Raphael had left me standing on that gravel drive. I was out in the garden plot behind the barn, checking the rows of spinach and carrots I'd managed to coax out of the rocky ground. The sun was just warming up. My knees ached, but I'd learned to work through that. The quiet out here didn't bother me anymore. I'd made peace with it. Then I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. I stood, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned toward the front yard. And there he was, Raphael. Same gray SUV, same sharp sunglasses, same stiff posture, like he wasn't sure whether to smile or brace for something. He stepped out and closed the door a little too hard. "Ma," he called out, like this was just a regular visit, like nothing had happened. I didn't move. I let him come to me. "You look good," he said, stopping a few feet away. "Really? Strong." "I am," I said, straightening up. He glanced around. "Place looks better than I expected." "It's mine," I said. "I made it that way." He gave a quick laugh. Nervous. I mean, it's not exactly what we had in mind When you what? I asked, folding my arms. He shifted his weight. When we tried to help you, we thought this would be the best place for you to heal. I held his gaze. Did you think sending me off without a say was help? Did Linda think selling my home behind my back was kindness? He dropped his eyes. It was more complicated than that. No, I said. It wasn't. You made it complicated. So you didn't have to feel bad about what you did. He looked back up, the edge in his voice sharper now. We were trying to manage everything. You weren't doing well. The house, your health, it was all too much. For who? I asked. For you? For her? He said nothing. I turned, walked over to the porch, and picked up the folder I had tucked inside the bench weeks ago. I handed it to him. He flipped through the pages, copies of the bank records, the emails, the power of attorney paperwork, and the note from the lawyer who helped me undo what I could. I know everything, I said calmly. I kept the journal. I documented what you and Linda planned. I've already spoken with a lawyer, and the sheriff has a copy of this. His face tightened. You talked to the sheriff? Jonah helped with that. I said, he knows people in town. I've already filed a report in case you tried anything else. That's when Raphael looked past me and saw Jonah standing near the barn. He wasn't trying to interrupt. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching. Raphael's mouth twisted. So now you've got backup? No, I said, I've got someone who respects me. That's not the same thing. He stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, this got messy. I know that, but it wasn't meant to hurt you. You left me here with no way to contact anyone. You let her control my bank accounts, my doctors, even my medicine. You took my home. What did you think would happen? He didn't answer. I took a breath. You've got two choices. You can sign the forms transferring what's left of my money and medical records back to me, or you can fight me and deal with the fallout when this goes public. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. He'd left a weak woman behind, but that's not who was standing in front of him now. Jonah started walking over slowly, not threatening, just present. Raphael's shoulders dropped. Fine, he muttered. I'll sign it. I'll need it by Tuesday, I said. No delays. He nodded once. Then, almost like he wanted to salvage something, he added, Linda still thinks you don't know what's best for yourself. I smiled, just a little. That's because she's never known who I am. Jonah stopped beside me, said nothing. Raphael glanced at him, then at me. Well, I guess I'll be going. You do that, I said. He turned and walked back to the car. Got in. Didn't look back. Just like the first time. Only now, I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one standing on my own land, on my own 2 feet, holding the line. The dust kicked up behind his tires as he pulled out of the drive and disappeared down the same road he brought me in on. I exhaled slowly. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. Jonah looked at me. You all right? I nodded. Better than I've been in years. He smiled, small and easy. Told you weren't done yet. No, I said. I'm just getting started. The grass still grows wild along the fence line, and the wind still kicks up dust some mornings. The barn leans a little, the porch squeaks when it rains, and the roof will probably need replacing next spring. But this land, this place, it doesn't feel like Exile anymore. It feels like home. I wake up with the sun most days. I stretch, make coffee, and walk through the garden before the heat sets in. The vegetables out back have taken to the soil better than I expected. Carrots, green beans, tomatoes, enough to keep me busy, and the pantry full. Some days, I fire up the ham radio in the barn and host a little story hour. Nothing fancy, just me reading aloud from old books or telling a short tale from my childhood. A few locals tune in. Jonah helped me fine-tune the antenna, and now I can reach folks 3 towns over. I don't know who's listening most of the time, but that's never been the point. Jonah comes by every couple of days now. Sometimes he brings breakfast, sometimes tools. Sometimes he just shows up with a quiet nod and a bucket of feed for the chickens he talked me into getting. For my birthday, he built me a greenhouse, said it was just scrap wood and stubbornness. But I know better. That man put in hours, and I thanked him the only way I knew how, homemade stew and peach cobbler. You keep this up, he said, wiping his mouth. You'll have me moving in by Christmas. I smiled, but we didn't rush the joke. There's no pressure between us. No big speeches. Just steady companionship. It feels good to be seen without being managed. A few weeks ago, I hosted a little gathering. Nothing big. Just neighbors I'd gotten to know over the past few months. Mrs. Calhoun from the post office brought apple pie. The Miller kids ran barefoot through the grass. Jonah grilled corn and kept the fire pit going after sunset. People came with smiles and casseroles, and they left with empty plates and full hearts. One of the little boys gave me a wildflower wrapped in a napkin and said, "Your house smells like cookies and dirt. I like it." That evening, when the porch had gone quiet and the chairs were stacked in the corner, I sat with my journal in my lap. I looked out at the land, still a bit wild, still needing work, but mine. And I wrote. They left me here thinking I'd fade. But I didn't fade. I rooted. It's strange how life turns. How what was meant to be the end of me became the beginning. They tried to write me out of the story, but I picked up the pen and started my own chapter. This land, this home, my hands in the soil, my voice on the radio, none of it was in the plan. But it's the life I chose. I think about the woman I was when I arrived. Scared, angry, tired. And the woman I am now. Still with sore knees, still figuring it out, but standing in full light. I may not have every answer. I may not get back what they took. But what I have now, it's mine. No one's waiting on the other end of a bank transfer. No one's deciding when I eat or where I sleep. No one's calling the shots over my shoulder. Just me. And I like that. I close my eyes at night with peace. I wake up with purpose. It may not look like much to someone on the outside, but from where I stand, it's everything. To those of you listening, wherever you are, whoever you are, maybe you've been cast aside. Maybe someone told you your best years are behind you, or that your voice doesn't matter anymore. But I'm here to tell you, your story isn't over just because someone else stopped paying attention. You get to choose how it ends. You get to fight for the chapter no one expected you to write. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the life you rebuild with your own hands is stronger than anything you lost. Now, before you go, I want to ask you something. What would you have done? Could you survive being discarded by your own child? And if you did, would you let that be the end of your story? If this story spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more real-life stories just like this one. And please leave a comment. I'd love to know what you would have done if you were me. Let's keep the conversation going.